qui essaye de me baratiner.
Hello and thanks for joining us. We're starting with the news that actor Bruce Willis has called an end to his film career. Best known as the character John McClane from the Die Hard movies, but also The Sixth Sense and Moonrise Kingdom, the family of the legend of the big screen says he's stepping back. Willis, who's 67, is suffering from the brain illness aphasia. Nick Rushworth reports.
It is the epilogue to a decades-long career. Bruce Willis' family says he has the communication disorder aphasia. His former wife, the actress Demi Moore, shared the family statement on Instagram. It said, "We are moving through this as a strong family unit and wanted to bring his fans in because we know how much he means to you as you do to him." The most common cause of the disease is stroke or head injury. It affects the production and comprehension of both speech and written words.
Aphasia is a disorder of language. So it's a disruption to the language system. So it can affect people's ability to produce language.
The family has not indicated how far advanced the disease is. However, his acting days are over. He is perhaps best known for his role as New York cop John McClane, who pursued bad guys in the 5 Die Hard movies released from 1988 to 2013. He had been especially active in recent years, appearing in 8 movies released just last year. At 67, his next role and fight is for his own health.
And Bruce Willis's latest movie, A Day to Die, came out at the start of March, and he has numerous others in post-production. Next to a trip back to the 1920s, a time often associated with greater freedom for women and more fluid gender roles. In French, the decade is called Les Années Folles, or the Crazy Years. Paris at the time was a world showcase for the avant-garde, and many of the artists were women. An exhibition at the Luxembourg Museum in Paris explores their life and work. Here's Nick Rushworth.
Women were depicted at the wheel of a Bugatti or as androgynous Amazons. Women artists in the Paris of the 1920s dreamt of equality with men, much in the spirit of Marlene Dietrich smoking a cigarette in top hat and tails. The theme is explored in an exhibition in Paris at the Musée de Luxembourg called Pionnières, that translates as female pioneers. Women during the First World War replaced men who had left to go and fight in battle. In the years that followed, avant-garde female artists sought to maintain parity. The British artist Marlowe Moss adopted a masculine appearance. Her abstract art was a direct influence on the Dutch painter Piet Mondrian. Fashion in the 1920s saw a major change in styles. Short hair came into vogue. Women swapped corsets for a more loose-fitting look. Trousers were acceptable in place of long skirts. Coco Chanel, as early as 1920, wanted women to show their legs.
They had muscles, they were tanned. Women played sports for the first time. They could go to the beach to sunbathe. It became the fashion.
The artists depicted that change in their paintings. Among those seen in a swimsuit was the American-born entertainer Josephine Baker, also seen here in a photograph at the wheel alongside long-standing friend, French athlete Violette Maurice, a lesbian who dressed as a man.
The 1920s were ahead of their time in terms of gender fluidity and open displays of homosexuality. Women who loved women showed their love quite publicly.
The exhibition in Paris runs till the 10th of July. It gives an insight into an extraordinary generation of female artists that history has more or less forgotten.
And next, we're talking about women on the French rap scene. And the question being asked at the National Convention of French Hip-Hop in Paris in March was, where are they all? France 24 went to meet some of the women moving the French music industry forward. Here's Peter O'Brien.
French hip-hop remains largely dominated by men. But women are increasingly staking their claim on TV, on social media and on streaming platforms. French-Chilean rapper Lazuli says she's doing it her way.
Just because you're a woman doesn't mean you have to do things you don't want to do to make music. Women have been present since the 80s, but we never saw them. In the 2000s, no women were signed to major labels. That started to change between 2015 and 2017, coinciding with the Me Too movement.
The Me Too movement reverberated through the music industry. In France, the Paye ta note or Pay Up campaign collected scores of sexist comments made to musicians, while the Balance ton rappeur or Music2 hashtag collected sexual violence accusations against a number of hip-hop artists. Diva, meanwhile, is a social media page which calls out sexual harassment in the world of French hip-hop. It's run by Lola Levent.
In the music industry, women are in danger. It's not crazy to say that. The percentage of women who are harassed psychologically or sexually is enormous, and it impacts their careers.
Levent also lobbies record labels to sign more female artists and reject clichés about them.
Hypersexualizing women harms them when you approach it in the wrong way. But it can also allow women to reclaim their bodies, especially if they've been a victim and have been hit with prejudice all their lives. I think it's an extremely powerful tool for self-confidence and for creativity. I think it's up to each woman to decide whether she wants to tackle this stigma or not.
In music videos, it's always women that are twerking, never men. But there are men that twerk, I've seen them. I thought it would be cool to switch these roles in my video and to have a man twerk, showing it's not taboo and we're not different.
The way we've internalized norms and values, the way we perceive others, all of that's a construction. That means there can be a deconstruction. We can re-evaluate the constructions we absorbed as children and as we grew up.
Rappeurs en Liberté, or Free Female Rappers, is a new competition funded by the government and various businesses. It aims to break down barriers and help the careers of young artists. Last year's top prize winner Issa Yasuke says it opened the door to new opportunities. The award includes €2,000, time in a recording studio, and a brand partnership.
We're now to an exhibition that tells the story of multicultural France through music. The Douce France show at Paris's Arts and Crafts Museum is focusing on Algerian musician Rachid Taha. He was the first artist to link the rhythms of Oriental music to rock and punk, as René Lefort and Olivia Salazar-Winspear report.
From the immigrant experience in working-class cafes to the rap scene via the North African artists who sang of their homelands. The Douce France, or Sweet France exhibition, is a deep dive into French multiculturalism from the 1960s to the present day, retracing the steps of rap stars NTM, revisiting Zinedine Zidane's moment of glory, as well as rekindling memories of a certain type of moped.
Right next to me, you can see the outline of a Peugeot 102, which was a means of emancipation for many young North Africans in the 1980s. As well as being popular among French kids, it was the emblem of the movement. The march, which was called Convergence 84, when you had crowds from 5 large towns converging in Paris. That came after the success of the March for Equality and Against Racism the year before, which had, as a slogan, France is like a moped, it needs a blended source of energy to get started.
One of the people marching that day was Rachid Taha. The late Algerian singer was to become the voice of France's immigrant communities and a musical force to be reckoned with.
There are people who don't know what immigration is. For example, if you say Vaux-en-Velin, they think it's at the other end of the earth, when in fact, Vaux-en-Velin is 10 minutes outside of Lyon. That's what we're trying to bring here, in Lyon and all over France, really.
Rachid Taha brought in elements of rock, punk and Rai to his music, anti-racist hymns calling out the discrimination of young Arabs in particular. With his group Carte de Séjour, they even recorded a cover of Charles Trené's Douce France. His former flatmate recalls a man who embodied rock and roll in his music and in his life.
It was really funny living with him, because he was someone who really liked to party, and he was very good at it. Sometimes it went a bit too far, and then in the early morning, he'd go and get breakfast and say, "I'm so sorry about last night." And of course, we couldn't be cross because he was such a lovely person.
Love, friendship and solidarity, a message he shared with his fellow musicians in concerts around the world. A skilled player of the traditional Algerian mandol, Hakim Hamadouche was a collaborator and, above all, a friend.
C'est très difficile de savoir qu'il n'est plus là.
It's very difficult to think of him not being here anymore. He left us a bit too soon. He was someone who wanted all French people of every background to feel at home, to feel like human beings. In fact, he had a way of putting it. I'm Algerian for the rest of my days, and French every day.
An attitude that embraces the very best of France's diversity and its artistic output, echoed in the notes floating through the air at this exhibition, the soundtrack to a sweet and multifaceted France.
And we'll leave you with a look at some spectacular dresses and ensembles from the 1930s, 40s and 50s. They're on display in Qatar at a retrospective about the French fashion house Christian Dior. Remember our website, we're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.